My name is Bailey Rodas, 26 years old. And on the night that was meant to bring my family closer, my mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "You have 48 hours to move out." For a second, time stopped. The soft shimmer from the Christmas tree danced across the table, spreading a gentle glow over faces I thought I recognized. No one said a word. Not my father, not my sister. Only the quiet hum of the heater and the scent of roasted turkey filling the room. Warm, suffocating, and painfully ironic. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh, to tell me it was a cruel prank. But no one did. My mother's knife slid through the turkey as though she hadn't just shattered what was left of peace in our home. My father took another slow sip of wine. My sister kept scrolling through her phone, pretending this wasn't happening. That's when it hit me. Sometimes betrayal doesn't roar. It whispers through ordinary moments wearing the face of family. I didn't ask questions. I didn't beg for an explanation. I just sat there watching people who shared my blood behave like strangers. Each heartbeat felt heavier than the last, echoing in my chest. When the night was over, I went to my room, packed my things, and decided that would be the final time I'd ever sit at that table. The next morning, I left in silence, without looking back, leaving behind the rent, utility, and tax bills I'd already stopped covering. Before we go on, tell me your city and what time it is there. I want to know how far this story about family betrayal has reached. The morning after I walked away from that table, one thought refused to leave my mind. How did we even end up here? It wasn't always this way. There was once a time when our home in Tampa felt light and full of life. My father, Edward, wore his police badge with pride, and my mother, Margaret, worked part-time as a nurse at the neighborhood clinic. We weren't wealthy, but we had rhythm. Bills were paid, birthdays were celebrated, dinner meant laughter, not silence. Then Dad retired early after a back injury, and everything shifted. The pension was small and the medical expenses weren't. Mom started taking extra shifts, but her smile faded a little more each month. I had just landed my first real job as a junior accountant, barely learning how to file my own taxes, when I began helping them, first with groceries, then utilities, then the mortgage. It felt natural. That's what good daughters do. At 21, I believed money was the simplest way to show love. Every time I sent part of my paycheck home, Mom would say, "You're such a blessing, Bailey." And I believed her. I didn't see that helping out would soon turn into holding everything together. Hannah, my older sister, had been adrift for years. She quit her marketing job because, in her words, she needed time to find her passion. That passion turned into yoga retreats and endless online shopping. She moved back home, claiming it was temporary. It wasn't. Within months, she was living entirely off the home I paid for. When I brought it up once, Dad sighed, saying, "She's just figuring things out." "Don't be so harsh," Mom added softly. "You've always been the responsible one, Bailey. You understand?" That sentence, "you understand," became a chain around my neck. It excused everything. Then there was Lydia, my youngest sister, barely 19 and still in college. She was bright, hopeful, and too shy to ask for help. So, I offered before she could. I paid her tuition, her textbooks, even the used car she needed to get to class. I never told anyone. I wanted her to have the opportunity I never did, to start life without the weight of debt. Month after month, my paycheck vanished into their hands. I kept telling myself, just until Dad's pension goes up, or until Mom's overtime pays off, or until Hannah finds work. Those untils never arrived. By the third year, I was the only one with a steady income, and the only one pretending everything was fine. Mom quit working nights, saying her back couldn't take it anymore. Dad spent his afternoons fixing the fence, then falling asleep on the couch. Hannah's temporary stay stretched endlessly, her voice filling the house with complaints about how hard life was. Lydia stayed quiet, caught between thankfulness and guilt. The house that once felt like a home became an account I couldn't close. I was paying for comfort I never received. Sometimes I'd come home from work to see lights blazing in every room, the TV shouting, and empty takeout boxes scattered across the counter. I'd feel drained, not from the office, but from knowing I'd clean it up because no one else would. Once, when I suggested that maybe everyone should pitch in, Mom frowned like I'd insulted her. Family doesn't keep score, sweetheart. I wanted to ask, then why do I feel like the only one losing? But I bit my tongue. Dad started calling me our little provider, as if it were a joke. Hannah rolled her eyes when I mentioned saving for my own apartment. "Oh, please, you'd miss us in a week," she'd say, laughing. But I didn't laugh, because deep down, I knew she was wrong. I wasn't afraid of missing them. I was terrified of realizing I didn't need them. Nights blurred into years. My paychecks came and went like tides, leaving me dry and proud all at once. Every small act of giving felt noble, yet hollow. I convinced myself this was love, that sacrifice meant goodness. It took me far too long to see the truth. I wasn't helping a family anymore. I was financing a habit. Days bled together until one evening I unlocked the front door and felt like a guest. By then, home felt rented. I could never leave, but I didn't belong either. Every corner of that house carried the weight of my paycheck, yet somehow none of it felt mine. The walls echoed with everyone else's voices, and my name only surfaced when something broke or needed to be paid for. Mom had developed a habit of reminding me to be grateful. "You should be thankful you have a place like this," she'd say, folding laundry I'd bought with detergent I'd paid for. Not everyone gets to live under a roof surrounded by family. I wanted to tell her that family wasn't what surrounded me anymore. It was obligation. But I kept quiet. Gratitude had turned into a one-way transaction. Hannah, of course, always managed to twist my efforts into a joke. "You really think money buys respect, little sister?" she'd tease, stretched out on the couch I'd financed, her nails freshly done. She'd say it with a grin, not cruel enough to start a fight, but sharp enough to leave a cut. I'd keep my tone steady, sometimes choosing silence over the exhaustion of defending myself. The more I gave, the smaller I felt inside my own home. Dad mostly stayed out of it. He'd glance up from the TV, sigh, and mumble something about letting the women handle it. He preferred comfort over confrontation. The remote in his hand was more familiar than taking a stand. To him, peace meant pretending everything was fine. Every evening played out the same way, Hannah lounging in the living room, Mom complaining about bills while holding my debit card, and Dad quietly flipping to the sports channel. I drifted through the house like a ghost, paying for everything, belonging nowhere. The air carried the scent of warm meals I'd bought but rarely ate, of perfume that wasn't mine, and resentment that wasn't theirs to feel. Sometimes, while I worked late at the kitchen table, Mom would drop little remarks. "You know, Bailey, when I was your age, no one took care of me." Her voice carried pride, but also blame. I wanted to ask why she couldn't see that I wasn't being cared for. I was the caretaker. But arguing was useless. In this house, logic never stood a chance against guilt. One night, when the air conditioner broke, I called a repair service without asking anyone. The next morning, I overheard Mom on the phone telling a friend, "Oh yes, we got it fixed. Edward handled it." I stood there, invisible again. It wasn't about credit, it was about erasure. My work only existed when it failed. There were times I thought about moving out, but guilt always spoke louder than reason. "They need me," I'd tell myself, even as Hannah joked about our little ATM. Lydia tried to defend me once, saying, "Bailey works hard for all of us." Mom immediately corrected her. "She works for herself, sweetheart. We all contribute in our own ways." I remember Lydia going quiet, realizing truth had no place in that room. The imbalance became routine. My life revolved around their needs, rent, groceries, emergencies, while theirs flowed freely above mine. At night, I'd lie awake, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, and sometimes the faint laughter drifting from Hannah's room. It sounded like a celebration I was never invited to. The breaking point came quietly. One afternoon, after paying yet another overdue electric bill, I walked into the kitchen where Mom and Hannah were chatting about redecorating the living room. I said casually, "Maybe everyone could pitch in for next month's utilities." The room went still. Mom froze, then turned to me with a look I knew too well, a mix of pity and disappointment. "Bailey," she said, her voice soft but sharp, "families don't keep score. That's not what love is." I stared at her, searching for reason in her words. Hannah smirked, stirring her coffee like she'd just witnessed a lesson being taught. My throat tightened. I wanted to ask why love always seemed to cost me the most, but the answer was already there, written on their faces. They didn't see inequality, they saw order, the kind that kept me at the bottom, holding everything up. That evening, I sat alone on the porch as the sun sank behind the neighbors' roofs. Laughter echoed from inside, the same laughter that once made me smile. Now it only reminded me how foreign it felt. The house glowed warmly from the outside, the kind of glow people mistake for happiness. Inside, I was fading, slowly disappearing into the wallpaper, for happiness. Inside, I was slowly fading into the walls. Money had made me essential but never valued. Every favor turned into an obligation, every effort unseen. Gratitude was something demanded, never offered. I kept trying to convince myself that balance would come eventually, that someday they'd finally see me as part of the family again. But deep down, I already knew the truth silence had long tried to bury. Bailey finally understood fairness had never lived in that house. That Christmas night, I wished for peace. The table sparkled under candlelight, the turkey glistening in the center, Lydia chatting brightly about her classes. For a fleeting moment, I believed we could pretend to be the family we used to be. Even Hannah laughed, her wine glass catching the soft gold of the lights. But peace in my family never lasted. Mom carved the turkey with care, wearing that well-practiced holiday smile. "This year's been tough," she began, her voice calm, almost tender. "But we're together, and that's what counts." I nodded, forcing a small smile of my own. Then she added, "And since we're all here, there's something we should discuss." The knife froze mid-cut. "Hannah's had a difficult few months," she continued. "She's fallen behind on her credit cards, $22,000. The interest alone was unbearable. We thought maybe you could help her out, Bailey." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The soft warmth of the candles suddenly felt like fire crawling beneath my skin. "You want me to pay her debt?" I asked quietly. Hannah didn't even look ashamed. She sipped her wine and shrugged. "You make the most money, don't you? It's not like you can't afford it." The room seemed to tilt. Silverware shimmered under the lights. Every sound grew too sharp, every breath too shallow. "I've been paying for this house, for everything in it," I said slowly. "I can't keep fixing everyone's mistakes." Mom's smile vanished. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "You know we always support each other. It's family." Dad cleared his throat, his tone colder than I'd ever heard. "Your sister's drowning, Bailey. What's a few more checks? You've always been responsible. This is your duty." That word, duty, cut deeper than any accusation. "I've done my duty," I said, my voice trembling, "and I'm tired of being punished for it." Hannah leaned back in her chair, her lips curling. "There it is," she said softly. "The martyr act. You love reminding everyone how much you do. Maybe it's not about helping anymore. Maybe you just want control." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Control?" I repeated. "You think I want control?" I wanted balance, respect, maybe even gratitude. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "Enough, you've changed, Bailey. You used to be generous. Now you're selfish and ungrateful." Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in realization. I looked at each of them, faces I once knew better than my own. "I'm not ungrateful," I said softly. "I'm just done being used." For a second, no one spoke. The candles flickered. Then Dad slammed his hand against the table. "Watch your tone," he barked. "We raised you better than this. We taught you to take care of family." "No," I said. "You taught me to carry you." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice was ice when she spoke. "You have 48 hours to move out." The sentence didn't sound real. Lydia gasped. Hannah hid a smirk behind her wine glass. I sat still, feeling something inside me finally untangle. The pain wasn't loud, it was quiet, like relief disguised as heartbreak. It was quiet, like relief disguised as heartbreak. I rose from my chair slowly. "You just made it easier," I said. My voice stayed calm, though my hands trembled as I placed the napkin on the table. No one tried to stop me. I turned and walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing softly against the hardwood floor. Behind me, the faint clinking of silverware started again, mechanical, detached, as if nothing had happened. The laughter never returned. Only the scrape of knives and forks against porcelain filled the air, a cold metallic rhythm marking the moment our family finally broke for good. The next morning, the house felt hollow. The Christmas lights still blinked weakly across the living room, but their glow only made the silence heavier. I woke before sunrise, not because I'd rested, but because my body had learned to move before emotion could catch up. My room was cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting on a blanket I wouldn't be folding again. Then I stood, opened the closet, and began to pack. Every sound felt sharp. The scrape of a hanger, the whisper of fabric, the metallic rasp of a zipper. It was as if the house itself was listening. I didn't rush. There was a strange calm in knowing I was finally doing something for myself. Each item went into the suitcase with quiet intention. Shirts, shoes, a framed photo I hesitated over before slipping face down between two sweaters. These walls had watched me grow, break, and build everyone else's comfort. Now they watched me leave it behind. When I stepped into the hallway, the air smelled faintly of coffee and leftover turkey. The house still wore its illusion of normalcy, as though last night hadn't shattered it. I moved quietly, my socks silent against the floorboards. As I reached for the last box, a soft knock came. Lydia stood in the doorway, her eyes red from crying, still in her pajamas, arms folded like she was holding herself together. "You're really going," she whispered. "I have to," I said. She nodded, then murmured, "I wanted to say something last night. I should have." I looked at her, the youngest, the one who'd never asked for anything. "It wouldn't have changed them," I said gently. Tears filled her eyes. "Mom said you'll come back when things calm down." I smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'll see you in another lifetime." She stepped forward and hugged me tightly, fragile in my arms. For years, I'd carried this family without realizing who else was breaking under the same weight. I pressed my chin to her shoulder and whispered, "Don't become them, Lydia. Please." Her voice cracked. "I won't." When she left the doorway, I placed my keys on the dresser. There was freedom in knowing I didn't have to hold on to them anymore. Downstairs, the kitchen looked almost peaceful. The dishes were gone, the table reset like nothing had happened. I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and set it on the counter. Final bills, rent, utilities, taxes, all stamped unpaid. I'd canceled every automatic payment an hour earlier. For the first time in years, their comfort wouldn't come from me. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on the counter I'd scrubbed 100 times, feeling the cold surface beneath my palm. Then I turned toward the window. The sun was rising, bleeding pale gold through the frost. It made everything look cleaner, even the house that had never truly been mine. As I lifted my suitcase, a floorboard creaked behind me. Mom stood in the doorway, still in her robe, hair messy from sleep. She looked older than I remembered. "We'll talk later," she said, her voice tight but controlled, like she still believed she could shape the story. I paused. There's nothing left to say. Bailey, she said again, softer now, almost pleading. You'll regret this. I met her eyes. Maybe, but I'll regret staying more. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then she looked away, arms folding across her chest like she needed to guard herself from the quiet. I turned back to the door, grabbed my coat, and opened it. The cold air rushed in, sharp, honest. It stung, but it felt like truth. Behind me, Mom muttered something I didn't catch. It didn't matter. On my way out, I stopped in the hallway and took one last look. The photos on the wall, vacations, birthdays, the illusion of unity, stared back at me like witnesses. I'd spent my whole life trying to keep those frames from falling apart. Now I realized they'd been crooked all along. And with that, I stepped outside. The driveway shimmered under a thin veil of frost, each step leaving behind a fleeting mark before vanishing. My car waited at the curb, small, ordinary, yet suddenly transformed into my escape. I lifted the suitcase into the trunk and stood there for a moment, breathing in the stillness. From the upstairs window, I caught Lydia watching. She didn't wave, only met my eyes, her expression steady but sad. I gave a small nod and she returned it. That was enough. Sliding into the driver's seat, I started the engine and let it hum quietly. The air vents exhaled a weak breath of heat while the radio clicked on, playing some old holiday tune drifting faintly through the speakers. It sounded hollow, like it belonged to another life. As I pulled away, I didn't look back. The past didn't need witnesses anymore. The house shrank in the distance, its frosted windows reflecting the pale morning light. Empty, cold, familiar. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for holding anything together. The road ahead was quiet, and so was I. Silence had never sounded so full. Freedom, I realized, smelled like salt and rain. Tampa's air felt thicker, warmer, alive in a way Cleveland never had. When I stepped from the car that first morning, the bay wind tangled through my hair and filled my lungs with something that felt like forgiveness. I had driven 12 hours straight, the car crammed with boxes, clothes, and a quiet resolve to rebuild from nothing. The small apartment I'd rented sat on a narrow street leading straight to the water. It wasn't much. One bedroom, peeling paint, humming pipes, a window that never fully shut. But it was the first place that didn't echo someone else's rules. For the first week, I stayed with Melissa, my old college friend who'd escaped our hometown long before I did. She greeted me with open arms and the rich scent of coffee. "You made it," she said, smiling. "Barely," I answered, my voice rough from the drive. "You're here," she said, handing me a mug. "That's what matters." Start over. Those words stayed with me. Start over. I repeated them like a prayer as I unpacked piece by piece. The apartment began to breathe. First a mattress on the floor, then secondhand curtains fluttering with the sea breeze, then a thrifted table by the window. When I paid my first month's rent, I smiled watching the receipt print. For once, every dollar I spent went toward my own life, not someone else's comfort. I bought groceries for one: eggs, bread, coffee. Standing at the stove, frying breakfast, I realized I didn't have to hurry anymore. No one was waiting. No one was taking. The loneliness that once haunted me now wore the face of peace. On the third day, I bought a small lightwood desk. Smooth, simple, perfect. It took me hours to assemble, not because it was hard, but because I wanted it just right. It became the heart of my new world. On it, I placed a small green plant, its leaves vivid and stubborn. I didn't even know what kind it was. "You'll do fine here," I whispered to it, smiling faintly. Each evening, I walked to the bay where the sunset painted the water in soft pink and gold. Children laughed near the docks. Older couples fed gulls along the benches. The air smelled of brine and hope. The world kept moving. Steady, indifferent, beautiful. On Friday, Melissa showed up with takeout boxes and a cheap bottle of wine. "So," she said, settling beside me on the floor, "how does freedom taste?" I laughed. "Expensive," I said, "but worth every cent." We clinked glasses. You'll be fine, she told me. You've always been the one holding everyone else together. Now it's your turn, her words rooted deep. For years, I had been the glue in a house that never truly wanted me. Now, I didn't need to hold anything but myself. That night, rain began. Soft at first, then steady, tapping gently on the window like fingertips reminding me I wasn't alone. I turned off the lights and listened. Tampa rain sounded different, not heavy or gray, but clean. It washed away things I hadn't realized I still carried. I thought about my past without bitterness, about my family without anger. They felt distant now, like characters from a story I'd already finished. The ache that once lived inside me had eased into something gentler, acceptance. Outside, the city hummed with life, cars, waves, and thunder rolling faintly across the bay. Yet for once it didn't overwhelm me. I drew in a deep breath, the air cool and damp, the room shimmering with reflections from the streetlights. As I closed my eyes, I realized I didn't miss the noise of the old house or the weight of holding it together. Tampa didn't ask me to carry anyone. It only asked me to live, and I did. I was finally living, not just surviving. Trouble always finds its way back. That morning, my phone buzzed 3 times before I finally glanced at the screen. Mom. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, it started again. Her voice message came through soft, sugary, but strained. Bailey, sweetheart, we just wanted to talk. Call us. Okay. I didn't. I made coffee instead, the steam curling against the window as I pretended the world outside was wider than the one I'd left behind. By afternoon, the sky turned gray. Thunder rolled faintly over the bay. I thought it was just another storm until someone knocked. 3 sharp hits, too heavy, too familiar. My stomach sank. Through the peephole, I saw them. Mom, Dad, and Hannah stood in the hallway, drenched from the drizzle. My heart raced, but my hand still turned the lock. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice flat. Mom's smile was tight, practiced. We were in the area, she lied. Can we come in? Before I could answer, they stepped inside. The air changed instantly. Warmth drained from the room. Dad looked around unimpressed. Small place, he muttered. Hannah stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes swollen. Mom started, We've had some problems back home. She paused, scanning my face for sympathy that wasn't there. The landlord cut off power. Said we missed 2 months' rent. Your father's been trying to talk to him, but he's being unreasonable. I said nothing. She went on, We just need a little help, just this once. You're doing well here, right? My jaw tightened. How much? I asked. 23,000, Dad answered before she could. It'll cover the bills and Hannah's, her credit cards. I finished for him. Silence. Dad's face hardened. Family helps family, he said sharply. You've got savings. You owe us at least that much after everything we did for you. The words hit like cold water. I laughed softly, not from humor but disbelief. Everything you did for me. Mom stepped closer, voice trembling. Bailey, please. We're struggling. I know you're angry, but we're still your family. You taught me that love means debt, I said quietly. I'm done paying. Hannah sniffled, her voice cracking. Please, Bailey. It's not my fault. I didn't ask for... You didn't stop asking either, I cut in. Every time I helped, you wanted more. I kept waiting for someone to say thank you. But all I got was silence, until you needed me again. Dad's temper flared. Watch your tone, he barked. We didn't raise you to talk to your parents like that. I met his eyes. You didn't raise me at all. You just drained me. He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already done. I walked to the door and held it open. You should go. Mom's voice broke. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But at least it'll be my regret, not yours. Hannah's tears fell freely now. Please, can't we just start over? I shook my head. I did. You didn't. They stood there for a moment, 3 people who once defined my world. Now strangers I barely recognized. Then Mom sighed and whispered, Let's go. Dad hesitated, then followed. Hannah turned last, her face a blur of guilt and fear. I didn't move until the hallway went silent again. I locked the door, leaned my forehead against the wood, and let out a long breath. Outside, the rain picked up, pattering against the window like applause for a decision too long delayed. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt, just space. Clean, quiet, and mine. The kind of silence that once frightened me now felt like proof of freedom. I made another cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on one by one. The storm outside raged on, but inside it was calm. I knew this peace would last. Not because they were gone, but because I finally meant it when I closed that door. Months passed before their names stopped appearing on my phone. At first, I'd still glance at the screen when it buzzed, a small part of me hoping for something different, a message that wasn't about guilt or money. But silence, I learned, could be a form of healing too. One afternoon, Melissa came by with takeout and an envelope. "Your sister sent this," she said. My hands froze. "Which one?" I asked, though I already knew. Lydia, the only one who hadn't come to my door that day. I waited until Melissa left to open it. Inside was a short letter written in Lydia's careful handwriting. "Bailey, I wanted to thank you. You were the only one who ever told me the truth, even when it hurt. I used to think love meant giving up everything for others, but you showed me it's supposed to make you feel safe. I finally understand that love isn't debt, it's respect. I'm working 2 jobs now. It's hard, but I feel free. I hope you're happy where you are." I read those lines 3 times. The ink was slightly smudged near her signature, as if she'd cried while writing. I smiled, not out of pride but relief. Someone had understood. The chain had broken somewhere. Later that week, I heard from an old neighbor back home. Word travels fast in small towns. Mom and Dad had lost the house. The bank repossessed it after months of missed payments. They'd moved into a relative's basement, too proud to ask anyone else for help. Hannah was apparently still drowning in debt. Her car had been taken back after she defaulted. I didn't feel joy hearing it, just distance, as if reading about strangers whose names happened to match my family's. Sometimes I wondered if they blamed me. Sometimes I wondered if they finally saw the truth. But those thoughts didn't linger long. Life in Tampa had a way of reminding me to stay present. The sunset still painted the bay gold, and the air still smelled of salt and possibility. I often sat on my small balcony with coffee, the same one I'd bought on my first day here, watching the waves move with patient rhythm. I thought about how long I had lived in survival mode, how exhaustion had become routine, and how quiet strength now filled its place. I whispered to myself almost like a prayer. Family should be a home, not a burden. For the first time, it didn't sound bitter. It sounded true. I folded Lydia's letter neatly, placed it in the drawer beside my desk, and turned toward the window where the last light of the day shimmered. The world outside felt both new and familiar, like breathing after years underwater. I had finally surfaced. I looked out at the horizon and smiled. "Thank you for listening to my story," I whispered, imagining the faces of strangers who might hear it one day. If you've ever had to choose between peace and family, what would you have done in my place?